Hey guys, welcome to Cafe IO. Cafe IO में आपका स्वागत है. So today I wanted to have a conversation. I was thinking about the fact that I've been an architect for about close to 12 years now. That's more or less like total experience. I've been architect for less like 6 to 8, probably number of years, basically designing systems. And what I've realized over a period of my journey is as I started as a developer and matured into a solution architect is that the depth of thinking has changed. What I thought was deep before is very different. And also the technical depth, which is purely perceived by, let's say, your ability to code, has, I would say, reduced, but also widened. So there's more and larger number of technologies that I know, but I know them in lesser depth. Now this is very natural when you move from a dev to an architect, and that's what I want to talk about. So this conversation is all about how do you mature from a dev or a developer to an architect. It's not going to be about the skills that you require, but it's going to be about the soft skills that you require and the way you think about it. And in my mind, this ability of thinking differently is much more important than a single technical skills. I'm not discounting the fact that they're important, but in my mind, they are very important. So what happened is I stumbled with this image today. As I was researching this topic, and what this is a very good depiction. Probably take a second to read about it. Now, what we have on the x-axis is breadth of knowledge, and what we have on y-axis is technical depth. Breadth of knowledge refers to maybe the number of areas think about it. It could be from a domain perspective, purely from a technology perspective or tools perspective, doesn't really matter. What's important, it talks about a body of knowledge and the breadth of it. And on the y-axis, it talks about the depth of it. So let's say tools, it could be that I know 5 different DevOps tools like Git, GitHub, Jenkins, Azure board and stuff, but I'm like, 4 out of 10 in most of them. But technical depth would be good 9 out of 10 in most of them. Now, again, it's an example. I'm not really a 4 out of 10 so many tools, but yeah, you get the idea, right? And if you think about programming, it would go in the aspect of how good is your ability to be able to code with a certain language and move forward with it. So that's what technical depth is, and the breadth of knowledge is, as we talked, right? Now, I would also want to add at this point that there's a very important perspective which can be thought of as a T-shaped, where you definitely have the breadth of knowledge and think about the alphabet T, but you also have depth in really one of the areas. For example, I'm largely a solution architect, but I have a very solid understanding of cloud principles, predominantly Microsoft Azure, because that's what I've been used to in most of my experiences. Now it could be different, and really, if you further extend this conversation, there's concepts like where you have T-shape, but you could also have things like paint drop, newer skills that you're acquiring. Remember like how paint trickles down? It's like that. So that's the idea. Now I wanted to extend this conversation further and move it to understanding and thinking about it as to what are the skills that we require as an architect, right? What do I do in my day-to-day life? So rather than Googling around, I just sat down and just wrote what I think is important. Now, really, if you think there's more skills, I'm happy to be added. Maybe something I've missed, definitely possible. So the first and most important is communication. And as architects, you would communicate a lot. There's different forms of communication. You're talking, you're listening, you're questioning, but you're also thinking. And I consider all of these as communication. There's external communication, there's inward communication. Then there's thoughts in between that are detailing those communication aspects. And so how do you question people? How do you think about responses? How do you actively listen to somebody? How do you make a person feel that you are really paying attention? Because that's important to continue going in depth, right? So communication is a really, really core aspect of being an architect. The I think the only way to improve at communication is to keep on communicating. If you're not good at a certain language, maybe you have been brought up in a local language, or you're part of your primary language is something native to you, right? And you want to get better at English, and that happens a lot, right? When in, especially in India. So the only thing that could help you is practice, right? And be really comfortable with the fact that hey, you're trying to acquire this and you're not a master at it. So if you don't understand something, it's okay to ask people to repeat about it. And that's the essence of it, right? So let's move a little bit more further. So when you move from communication, I think the second thing which I value the most is management. And what I mean by management is not really some sort of an org structure or a hierarchy, is how are you managing stuff, right? How are your people skills? How are you managing people? And when I say manage people, it need not be that you have a direct relationship in the form of a reporting relationship with them. It could be something like, they're part of the same team, or you're working on with them towards a certain project, and then you move on to a different team, and that happens a lot with architects, right? So how do you work with people, right? How do you manage people? How do you gain an alignment with them? How do you collaborate with them? Those are, different facets of it. Don't worry about the hierarchy. I think I just wrote it down. And then one another dimension is self-management, right? I think this is really critical in my view, because self-management is one of the key aspects which can help you manage, remember, structure so many different dimensions that you're talking to. I think at one point in time, or almost, I wouldn't say at one point in time, this is more of a pattern, right? It always happens that if there are 6 meetings lined up, all of them is 30 minutes each, which is like, about 3 hours of conversation or 4 hours of conversation, if it's more. And then all of them are for different projects. So how have you structured your notes? How have you gathered your thoughts? How have you gathered your questions are really important. And I rely personally a lot on tools to help me with that. I have task management app, notes management apps, journaling, and the best thing that I use is simple pen and paper. I really have tons of paper around me and things that I could use to write. So almost always I'm scribbling down notes and stuff which are said in conversations so that I have a very strong recollection of them. And writing really helps. Memory is really not good, especially if you're, listening to so much of information every 30 minutes and you don't get time to process them, and you probably process them in batches, because that happens a lot. So to me, that's pretty much the aspect of self-management, and I want to give it a really high importance. Moving further, I've just tried to put some random stuff here. And by random, I mean, these are really aspects that came to my mind, right? Problem solving is a key area. You are really solving problem for people. So be always aware of that. Leadership is there. Innovation is there. Learning, which is central to all of this, right? There hasn't been a month where I've not learned. If I find that I've spent 3 months without learning, I start to get agitated. I mean, either there's something wrong with my role or the project or the team or something, or even maybe the company, right? So that's really central. How you document stuff is really important. Negotiation is important, and negotiation is probably important to mention in itself, because architecture is all about trade-off, balancing decisions, something over something else. And that aspect rubs a lot of friction around people. And the only way to achieve that, which is my final soft skill, is, learn to be really, really calm when you enter heated conversations. And at least there's tons of heated conversations I've fortunate enough to be not lose temper in any one of them. Maybe that has happened in my earlier years, but doesn't happen anymore. So, and that's a skill which is really acquired. It comes with practice. So calmness or peace, while might sounds like a philosophical topic, is really important, because when you are debating and balancing so many different decisions, you tend to think that, hey, my decision is not getting respected. I am not getting respected. And that aspect of I and gaining credibility, the moment it starts to come, starts to impact and influence your decision making ability and your technical designs. So always try to stay calm and remember, be as an architect. All right, this is Akash signing off. If you have liked the conversation, please put a thumbs up, put in comments if you want to listen more stuff like this. Till then, bye bye.